well. So again, I want to try to keep this as interactive as possible. So feel free to ask any questions as needed. So a little bit of Las Cruces. So how many? I guess it's kind of hard to get a show of hands, but Carlos, how many participants are? I guess where's our participants coming from? A majority of our guests tonight.
We have about, let me see, almost 80 people in the program currently, either acting as teachers or students. And it's about half and half students and teachers. And
Okay,
then
great.
from the students, this year we primarily brought in folks from our node areas where Tree, New Mexico is trying to build capacity. So we have folks from Silver City, Las Cruces, Truth or Consequences, and folks coming from Gallup as well, or near Gallup area, as well as Santa Fe. And then maybe half of those are from Albuquerque.
Great. So we're touching on all different parts of the state. So that's again that's the progress that the industry's making. And again, I can't commend all you participants enough for making this happen and showing your participation. Um, so a little bit of our municipality here in Las Cruces for those of you that aren't familiar. So the city of Las Cruces. Can you guys still see my screen by chance? Okay. So city of Las Cruces. Um, we're the Parks and Recreation Department. We tend to call ourselves the fun experts. So that's kind of our motto within the city. We have over 1,700 acres of public green space, community centers, and different facilities citywide. Um, Keep in mind that this was probably the last known account for public green space was maybe about 5 years ago. So this was the last number. It's probably changed dramatically within the past 5 years due to just the current growth that we're experiencing within the city. So this is again, this is kind of right where we're at, but it's I would say 1,700 plus acres, so, and we're still growing. Um, we offer a different range of diverse programs and activities that play an integral role in enhancing the quality of life in the city and our regional borderland areas. So that kind of we tend to we got a lot on our plate as far as the department and what we're covering and how we're addressing a lot of this stuff. So I know our topic for tonight was urban forestry itself, and so urban forestry is kind of a relatively new term that came in the industry. It kind of piggybacks off of more of our traditional term of a forester, and so before I begin, I just kind of want to make that differentiation on how each of the industries address one another and what their initiatives are. Kind of look at it, get an overview, give you guys an overview as far as what the difference is. So obviously, forestry versus urban forestry. Anybody want to take a stab at that and make some guesses?
Forestry in an urban setting.
That's yeah, that's a piece of it. Yeah, that's probably the core function of it, obviously. Um, so we'll go kind of give you the I'll give you the differences here. So forestry obviously is termed. We deal with the same. We deal in the same aspect that we're looking after trees as an industry. Obviously, forestry deals with a little bit more in depth functions as far as how they're managing planting and conservation and repairing of woodlands. Also, production. That's a big piece. The lumber production part of it. How they're preserving the water tables with runoff and erosion control and stuff like that. They're typically managing. This time of the year, it's pretty unfortunate that we experience a lot of forest fires around New Mexico. So usually when that takes place, part of a forester's role is they're already trying to get into gear as far as how they're restoring a lot of their woodlands, whether it's through natural uh, uh, replanting of trees, establishments, or uh, um, some of the native plantings that typically belong in a forest that are in a forest. Um, some similarities, obviously. Again, Carlos kind of mentioned that earlier on some of how we design our landscapes and an audience for a forester obviously is going to be wildlife. That's probably their biggest uh, uh, beneficial at one of the biggest beneficial aspects, and then the community. We like to enjoy the recreational areas and our forests of New Mexico. So that kind of, without getting too much into depth with it, that's typically what a forester, the term forester actually deals with. Now, urban forestry, we're kind of the spin-off of what a forester is, and obviously it's just something that was modified over time. Um, I could say maybe 20 years ago when I was going to school, urban forestry really wasn't. It wasn't the industry was there, but it really wasn't a thing yet. That it was just now starting to kind of get touched on. Like I said, 20 years ago, there wasn't really the industry of urban forestry wasn't around. You know, and now it's a predominant study in horticulture classes. So that's kind of the like I said, it's the spin-off of forestry. Um, so again, urban forestry on our end, on our aspect of it, is the practice of managing trees and other natural resources in urban settings for human and environmental benefits. So that similarly relates to what a forester does. Um, we play a crucial role in maintaining urban forests, which include obviously our forests are going to include trees and parks, streets, medians, public spaces, such of that. So that's totally opposite of a natural setting of a natural forest. Um, some of our activities include our daily activities or core functions include tree planting, tree management, whether it's pruning, pest control, pest and disease management, um, and advocation. That's probably one of our biggest tools that we're trying to push out there as an industry. And again, without that advocation, obviously we wouldn't have participants like you guys, ladies and gentlemen, in today's and this year's program. So it's a real big. That's one of our biggest tools, and it's also a big challenge for us as well. Is trying to get buy-in from um, just buy-in in general. So that's kind of what our roles tackle in the industry. Um, so again, something about urban foresters. So every urban forest is going to be unique. and so the scope of an urban forester is just much more than the guy or the girl that's actually going out planting trees and monitoring and performing assessments and diagnosing. You know, we have to wear many different hats in the industry. um, and part of that, it's whether we're how we're working with the community. Let's see if I had some notes here. Oh, sorry about that. um, did I lose you guys? Sorry about that.
Did you get a frozen screen, Orlando?
Okay, there we go. We're back on. Sorry, guys. I lost you guys on my end. Sorry about that. So again, we got to wear many different hats in the industry. Whether one of those hats is whether we're the environmentalists for our urban forests. So we're always trying to keep an eye out that finding that balance for our wildlife, for our social needs. Um, Again, where we have to play administrator at times to try to convey the needs to our whether it be upper administration, local politicians, whoever our civic leaders are, and addressing concerns and getting buy-in on that. Um, Again, we wear the engineer hat. You know, many times when things are urban forests are getting developed within a municipality, we're addressing some of those needs. What's the actual what's the best recipe for establishing trees and the right approaches that we need to be taking. So again, those are just a few of the hats that we wear as urban foresters. And again, it's that we wear the hat as far as the outreach piece, where we're addressing the community's needs. You know, how do we want to see trees? Where do we want to see trees? What do we have specific intended uses for them? So again, there's again a lot of different hats that we wear within the industry, and juggling all those things and at one time can get a little crazy sometimes. So again, urban forestry on my level within our municipality, um, we look at more of the broader range planning and the management of our urban forest. So again, as you guys move forward with your ventures in the industry itself, you know, always keep in mind that every site, every urban forest is going to be unique, and is it's going to require different levels of attention and initiatives. And so your roles are going to vary from site to site. um, you know, I seem to have my personal preferences on things and the way I think the approaches should be taken. But you know, again, there's always going to be different obstacles and challenges that we're going to uh, endure that may not allow us to have that specific format that we're looking for, or that specific urban forest that we're trying to we're trying to obtain. So again, you know, that's probably the biggest piece to this is really being open minded on your approaches to a lot of your initiatives. Again, some of the challenges that we endure. Again, some of our main challenges that pretty common within the industry, but again, this is probably some of more specific on our municipality here within Las Cruces. Again, you'll see right here difficult growing conditions. So, I mean, that's probably our number one challenge alone is I know Carlos touched on that earlier as far as our heat index is gradually rising. We're starting to move into different growing temps. So 15 years ago, uh, plant material that was coming out is now starting to get phased out within our area, just because the extreme temperatures aren't allowing for it to grow susceptibly anymore, or sustainably. Sorry about that. So again, that's probably our biggest condition. It's one of our biggest challenges, um, growth. So Las Cruces alone is expanding. I mean, it's kind of, I like to call it fast and furious, the way our expansion is going right now. So again, it's that's that balance of trying to find, how do we keep forests, keep our trees established, but at the same time keep that balance of infrastructure going. Um, Again, as expansion continues, a lot of things get changed around. Soils get modified. It's probably not the the best soil for planting a tree now in that area where it was maybe a year ago, just because of construction and removal of soils, uh, uh, different microclimates that are now being produced with heat off of buildings, sidewalks, uh, roads, and other different infrastructure. So again, that makes another challenge. One of our biggest things, obviously, is water. We're at a time right now where it is, we are pretty scarce with it, and trying to utilize it to its best efficiency, and without and being sustainable with it, again, is probably one of our biggest challenges on a day-to-day basis. I The public requests that come in, or the public, what the public wants out of our city is they want green, they want it lush, they want it, um, um, they want to see that vegetation, but yet on our side of the industry, or I guess the municipality of it, is, how do we do that? How do we get there? And what's the best approach that we take? So again, that's always an ever going carousel of questions and planning that takes place. Real quick, I'll answer. I got Ray's question here. Let me pull up the chat. Sorry. So Ray had a question. How much irrigation do we use in parks? Um, and perhaps in sidewalk trees in Las Cruces. Uh, Numbers offhand, I don't have those on hand, but I'd be happy to share with you guys kind of our monthly watering budgets, and you guys can kind of look at that. Again, generally speaking, those numbers are going to vary. Um, there's the ideal watering schedule that we should pursue. But again, every site is going to be specific to watering needs. So as an example, a park obviously is going to retain a lot more moisture because of the more open green space, um, as opposed to a median in the middle of traffic. Obviously there's a lot more transpiration that's kicking off from trees, and the heat alone, obviously it's going to cause trees to require a little bit more water. So again, every site is going to be different. Soil obviously is going to be a different, is another condition that we face. um, Typically our soils here in Las Cruces are anywhere from sandy loam to clay loam, and so closer to the river, on the west side of town, obviously we get more into a clay soil. As we start going east up and towards the Oregons, it's more of a sandy soil. So again, leaching always plays a different, an important factor on water retention in our soils. But again, I can share those with you once I get them, and I'll pin them up on one of the discussion boards, and you guys can kind of take a look at our numbers and how that's our that. Um, Again, one of the other challenges that we do face is insufficient resources for proper care. So proper maintenance is critical to a thriving urban forest, but it demands time, resources, staffing, and coordination from municipal governments. It may also be difficult to prioritize for financially, um, for on the private side of the industry or private owners. Um, Again, I can't say more than enough about this. This is probably one of, I would have to say, any urban foresters. Um, this is probably one of the challenges that you lose sleep at night trying to piece together how to take the right approaches on things, and limited staffing, and whether it's budget or staffing or resources, whether it's having the actual tools to perform the right job. So that, again, that's probably one thing. That's probably one of those things that a forester, an urban forester, can juggle all day long and wrestle with till he's black and blue. And our ideal, our ideal approach to it is we would have all the staffing we need. We would have unlimited funding and unlimited tools to do everything that we need to do. But again, in an ever changing environment, it doesn't always work that way. Um, Again, development again is probably one of those challenges that we have to work around just because of new growth from municipalities. Um, Previously, our canopy, overall canopy throughout the city is expanding, but is it where we want to be? Probably not. So creating that balance and trying to contend with the planning and new construction that's taking place. Again, that's always an uphill challenge, and trying to get that message across on tree establishments, and trying to preserve a lot of that within our municipality. Uh, Data and management. I've probably spent the last 2 years. This is probably the most critical of my my duties within the department. I've spent the last couple years since I've been here actually collecting data, whether it's doing tree assessments. We're looking at our survivability rates on trees. We're looking at loss of trees. So we're putting all those numbers together. We're starting to get into appraisals as well to try to put a dollar figure to that. And so this is probably one of my biggest tools on how I advocate to our civic leaders, to the general public, on whether it's the challenges that we're facing, or the direction that we need to take, or whether it's maybe a kudos where we're at right now, and how we're growing. So data and management is probably one of your biggest. If you can't paint the picture, you'll never get the message across. And this is first and foremost uh, any urban forester's approach, or what their approach should be when trying to develop or preserve an urban forest. So as part of I thought I'd put some nice pictures just to kind of give you guys some more insight as far as some of the challenges that, this isn't particularly our municipality, but as you can see, this is a good representation of what we deal with on a municipality. So obviously, you look at picture A. Um, it's, the growing space for those trees is inadequate, so that makes it challenging for trees to actually thrive and grow to their full potential. um, B, obviously, I mean, I'm not sure what happened there in the planning, but they dropped two trees right next to each other, and that's going to create some issues later on. um, C is kind of the same thing, the inadequate growing space. Soil compaction is what we deal with as far as new construction and trying to establish trees. I'm almost quite sure that when they establish that tree and planting C or A or B itself, the soils became quite modified, and again, it may not be a suitable condition for that tree to actually grow. Um, D, this is something that we deal with on, quite often within Las Cruces, and it's trying to preserve a lot of the established trees that are already in place and working around construction. I mean, again, you can kind of see, it just kind of gives you an idea of what takes place out there, and the some of the detriments that can happen out there. E and F obviously are kind of um, it's kind of a representation of some of the pollutants that go into our soil, whether it's from storm runoff from our roads, or actually just kind of what you see there, different trash and stuff like that. It leaches into the soil, and that's probably not the best suitable condition for a tree as well. Um, G's probably one we're all familiar with. It's the infamous carving of the trees to leave our mark. Um, not we probably never. I never really thought much of it when I was in my adolescent days, um, and how much detriment harm we were causing the trees. Again, and then that's another vandalism, I guess you can say, is what we deal with. Um, it's pretty common in an urban setting.
Yolanda,
Yes.
a couple of things. Okay, just to follow up on my question about irrigation. Um, I was walking in downtown Albuquerque a couple of years ago, and I did notice that on the sidewalk, the trees similar to that tree well you have there actually did have irrigation on the ground. And I got to actually talk to one of the employees or arborists from Rec and Park who said, yeah, they got a whole nice system that's on the ground for irrigation. They must have, taken a lot of planning and a lot of money. And also about this tree you got there, a really fancy kind of circular uh, well around it, and that's probably a metal grating. What do you think of the metal grating? Is that good or bad?
Well, the maintenance portion, the maintenance upkeep obviously has to take place at some point. Um, that tree, the actual trunk, cannot outgrow that the circumference of that grate. So if you're not monitoring that and being able to perform the maintenance to kind of gradually cut out pieces of that grate to allow for expansion, that's that'll create an issue down the road. Um, Irrigation obviously is probably the biggest factor in that. Um, Although there could be irrigation to that tree well, but again, think about look at the surrounding infrastructure. It's all brick, concrete. So you got to remember what it took, the preparations to install all that brick, how much compaction they had to compact the soil alone, to install that brick to keep a flat surface. So again, that alone puts a strain on your root systems. And again, when you have compaction in soils, then you don't have adequate drainage. So that automatically is going to put a stress the survivability rate of a tree. Um, Probably the one plus or the benefit that I do see out of it, obviously, it's a brick paver system, so it's got a permeable surface, so it allows for some drainage, but how much? That's the question. And if something like this, and we run in, so I've ran into this scenario more times than none, and it's trying to find that balance. Are we giving the tree enough water versus creating a tripping hazard for the public? Again, and so when you got a flat surface kind of like that, I don't really see anything in there where uh, water can actually hold for that tree alone. So good chances are, if they're irrigating, if they over irrigate, that water is going to run out of that grate, and then again, then it's probably not a sustainable use of watering. So again, there's a few different things that I noticed with that picture. Uh, this is another one. This is an article that came across a couple months ago, and I was quite surprised that this is occurring. But again, this is a new challenge, obviously, in the industry. Um, so this is a downtown LA, and it looks like they have a tree serial killer out there. And unfortunately, somebody's going around downtown LA and just hacking away at the trees, you know. So again, it was quite surprising when this article was shared with me. But again, it's just an ever-changing culture of what we're having to face, and another added challenge. Um, for our sake and our municipality, obviously we have um, we have standards as far as how we're establishing new tree planting. So we, as a municipality, we tend not to plant uh, anything smaller than a 2-inch caliper tree. And just because of our experience here within Las Cruces, anything smaller, whether if it's a 15-gallon pot, a 1-inch caliper, or anything smaller than that, um, it tends to get destroyed. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of the beast, that what we have to contend with. So it's part of our policy now that we just, anything over 2-inch caliper and bigger is what we're putting out in green spaces around town. But yeah, that's it's unfortunate that somebody would go out and do something like that, and on an appraisal level, that alone, just looking at those 3 trees, that's probably at least about $10,000 in a loss, whether it's trees, whether it's the material itself, and the man hours to actually go remove it, replace it, uh, anything else that comes in between, checking irrigation, just all that. So it's something to take into consideration when as we go forward. So on our end of the spectrum here for the city, our main focus, and as I mentioned earlier, every urban forest is unique in its own fashion, and the requirements to maintain it, or the direction you want to take with it's going to be unique. And so our main focus for the city of Las Cruces is public safety. Obviously, that's first and foremost. Um, Improvements of our urban environment. Um, so public safety, some of the things that we tackle with on a day-to-day basis is we're managing tree risk, whether that's in parks, right of ways, medians, um, whether we're working with some of our extension offices, um, tree maintenance. Again, we tackle that one. That's probably our daily. Uh, Probably 90. We spend 90% of our time tackling tree maintenance issues all around town, and the dreaded emergency response. Although we've been pretty fortunate enough on our end that we haven't had anything detrimental or severe losses in trees over the past few years, but it does occur every so often. Um, and then some of the pictures that I kind of put out there is just kind of give you a representation of the different settings that we address, whether it's a park, um, more times than none. Obviously, trees on right of ways. We're always contending with that. Um, we seem to here in Las Cruces. I'm not sure what the thought process was maybe 60 years ago, but we for some reason we have a lot of mulberries that were planted on our right of ways on residential properties, and now that a lot of those trees have actually grown to their full potential, now we're contending with uplifting of curbs and sidewalks, and it becomes a trip hazard. Um, and that's kind of one of the it's probably not the not so fun parts to my role with the city, but um, again, public safety is always going to supersede uh, a tree, and that's just because that's the direction that the city has chosen to take. So, sometimes we do come across that where we've had a mulberry that's probably 40 years old, and it's actually outgrown the right of way space, and sometimes we have to make those decisions to seek removal. Is it always the best decision? Probably not, but then again, it's weighing out that balance. Do we want pedestrians hurt over a piece of sidewalk that's been uplifted, or curbing or whatnot? So that, again, it's probably not it's always a hard decision that we have to contend with, but this is for some reason that seems to be um, somewhat of a norm just because of the amount of mulberries that are established in our city. Some of the other pictures, obviously, just kind of from our facilities at City Hall, and then to medians. That's always another challenging aspect. So tree risk management, um, contending with hazardous trees. I would want to say that 2024 was probably one of our hottest summers up to date, and it did create we did receive some quite substantial loss of trees within the city. Again, we didn't have as much rainfall as we liked, the extreme heat, so it put a stress on some of our irrigation practices. Um, one of our biggest one of my biggest pest related issues that we're dealing with right now in Las Cruces is mistletoe, and we seem to have I mean, it's everywhere, so we're tackling that as diligently as we can. Um, and it's a slow process as well. Where some of these trees, obviously, this is um, pictures down below. This is kind of right on one of our parks near the Rio Grande there, and we see mistletoe a lot more uh, affecting cottonwoods or our ash trees around the city. So again, this is probably something we're tackling on a yearly basis as much as we can, trying to preserve the trees without having to seek removal. Again, but it's a slow process on that. Tree risk assessments are probably again, that's kind of goes back into that data and management. piece that I discussed earlier. So um, we've just now partaken in a tree assessment for the city as a whole. Well, on public green space, I should say. Um, and with those numbers, that's really what I'm trying to address. And I'm trying to get that out there to whether it's our civic leaders or engineers or developers and project planners and the community, as far as here's where we're at, here's what we got, and here's what we how we should address it. So that's kind of one of our biggest tools right now that we're putting together. We're just in the beginning stages of it. So last year we did an assessment for 5,000 trees. This year we're going to run the same thing. We'll do another assessment, and hoping to uh, I'm hoping to actually have this wrapped up within the next 5 years. It's like I said, it's going to be another slow process to actually get those numbers together, and then still try to keep up with the new expansion that's taking place. So again, it's an ever changing carousel. So tree maintenance, again, this is obviously a perfect picture. You can see one of our trees that was uh, sabotaged in one of our parks. You know, again, my staffing, part of the challenges that I partake in with this is I carry a staffing of two full-time staff and one temporary employee or a seasonal employee. So for us, yeah, we definitely don't have enough eyes to put on everything. We try to rely on the public and other interdepartment staff, and again, this is just some of the issues that we do run into. Margot had a question. Can you use tree stewards to help with inventory and assessment? Yes, at some point, I do want to go that route. Um, Again, my only challenge with that is I need to get something established kind of quick. So it's right now I've had to resort to bringing in a, um, a firm to actually come in and they can cover some ground for us. Once we get that established, that's the approach that I would like to take is actually utilizing our tree stewards and to do a lot more monitoring in parks and being able to put eyes on things that we don't see on a daily basis. And obviously yes, there's a different some training that would need to be involved before we could actually proceed with that. Um, and again, but yes, definitely would like to use tree stewards at some point in the near future. So part of our maintenance practices or daily activities that we perform are tree planting, pruning, and tree removals. Obviously, that's the dreaded part of the job, but again, it does happen. Fertilization and pest control. And again, compaction of girdling roots and treating compaction. So that's probably one of our again, that's another different task or an activity that we perform quite often, whether it's in new construction. um, we're always monitoring for trees and landscapes that we notice some different changes from when they were first established to maybe a month down the road, and they're not doing so well, and so we look at that. We look at soil. We're always probing our soils. We're checking moisture levels. We're checking pH. We're trying to get as much information on some of the issues that are occurring as much as we can, and then we will address it from there. Emergency response. So this is one of our day-to-day, doesn't occur often, but for us in Las Cruces, our emergency, or kind of my dreaded times of the year, are going to be in March once we get our 70-mile-an-hour winds. That's kind of a dreaded time for me when um, those winds start to kick up. So picture on the left there, this actually took place about a month and a half ago, and it was one of our older cottonwoods along the Rio Grande there at one of our parks. Um, Previous attempts had been made to try to preserve the tree as much as they could by performing some cabling on the tree to kind of help that the weakening trunk there, and it finally just gave way within one of our little wind gusts that we had. Um, the picture to the right, that was, I think, believed like in 2018. So that was one of our parks, and again, we had a windstorm that rolled through town, and you can see the detriment that it created on one of our parks. It just really knocked a lot of stuff out. Um, with that, the cleanup obviously is the first piece that we address, and then um, the aftermath, how trees are affected. Whether do we need to get in and do some restoration pruning, or do we need to seek removal? Those are things that we got to look at. Hazardous conditions. Um, the picture on the left was quite interesting, and a little story, a side story on that. So that tree had fell. Obviously, you guys can kind of see the power line or the telephone line that's running across that picture. So when that tree fell the previous evening before, we were unable to dispatch emergency staff just because of the contact that it was making with that phone line there. So we had to reach out to our Paso Electric, the electric company, to come in and perform um, their cleanup portion of that to clear it away from the power line before park staff could actually come in the next day and tackle that. But again, one of the challenges that we had to address with that is that tree. You can see a portion of that tree. It just stayed. It wasn't fully disconnected from the trunk itself, so it's still kind of suspended up in the air. Um, the next morning, when we arrived with staff to actually address it, um, we had a homeless encampment underneath all that. So that was the challenge, to uh, um, try to clear the area, and again, it was a pretty high risk that somebody would take to go and set up an encampment under that. So it was, yeah, again, just some of the daily things that we see out there, and what we encounter. So the direction that we've or that we're currently taking as a municipality, um, obviously for our environmental improvements, is improving our overall aesthetics of the city. Um, Increase in tree benefits, obviously, the enhanced planning. So again, probably some of the practices that how we were establishing trees or installing trees in some of our urban landscapes maybe 10 years ago. Um, that's changed on how we're irrigating, how we're installing irrigation, how we're trying to enhance soils when we're installing the landscapes. And I mean, protection of our urban forests, obviously that's what we have now. That's probably a key piece and trying to retain that. And resource monitoring, that's probably the last piece that we've really have just begun to take an approach with. um, and so that's, I believe, as of right now, that's starting to really kind of shed some light on things and within the department itself, um, within our practices, within our planning, and 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 within some of our prioritized activities, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis. So that's really opening it up. I'd say within the past 2 years, that's kind of opened up some eyes, you know, along with some of our civic leaders, as far as, okay, here's how we need to take this approach, and here's why, you know. Um, so some of the benefits that we're trying to shoot for, obviously, is pollution reduction and oxygen production. So that's always, um, if there's a famous quote out there that was once said that, you know, the trees are the lungs of our city, you know, and it's nothing far from the truth, as far as that quote. Um, Improve quality and provide habitat for wildlife. So again, that's that other balance, the other hat that we try to wear as an environmentalist. How do we not just we're reaping the benefits of the urban forest, but how is our local wildlife benefiting as well? Um, Flooding, again, perfect example. We've all seen up in Ruidoso some of the wildfires, and you know, the aftermath of that, and every time they get a downpour, the detriment that causes, um, from some of their flash flooding, you know. And Las Cruces is pretty unique in its location, um, just because of our how we're situated in the valley. So everything tends to run downhill in town. So trying to decrease some of that runoff and channel it to other places, and actually utilizing some of that runoff for beneficial irrigation and whatnot is something that's always being considered in the long-term planning of our urban forest. Reduction in noise pollution. Um, Again, that's always, as the city continues to expand and growth. Um, Again, there's an increase in noise pollution. So how are we combating that? We're looking at that. Um, that's something we could probably always we can wrestle with all day long, and finding that actual, the recipe for success on that is always going to be a tough one. Um, and again, uh, increasing our economic stability. So whether you're not aware or not, but there are studies that have been performed out there, and trees actually um, your help benefit businesses. Um, and I think, Carlos, you kind of nailed that on the head, where trees actually guide your path, where you're always going to walk towards the shade. Um, some of our downtown mall areas, again, with the additional shade that's running along the streets, that actually helps. Studies have shown that actually helps patrons actually hang out a lot longer out there and window shop and kind of take their time. They're not in a hurry to jump in their car and take off. So there's an economic benefit to providing trees and within a city as well. Aesthetics. So that's kind of that ideal outdoor event that we we try to shoot for. Um, on throughout the department, Parks and Rec, so we do host a lot of different activities throughout the summer. A couple of our more notable events are music in the parks or movies in the parks, and so again, it's probably preferable that we can establish as much trees as we can in a park to provide that environment, that comfortable environment for the general public to enjoy, rather than sitting in a lawn with no trees and having a 90-degree blaring sun hitting you in the afternoon. So obviously, aesthetics. Some of the values that um, some of the additional values to that are obviously are an increase in property values, um, enhancements of our surroundings. They're a little bit more enjoyable. Shade is obviously the big one there, and I kind of touched on that last slide there. But there are studies show that trees also enhance community economic stability by attracting businesses and tourists, and help people tend to linger and shop longer along tree-lined streets. So again, these are just some of the things that I'm touching on. Keep in mind, this is kind of what our initiative is as a department, and how we're trying to foster that. Um, it may be different in your municipality or whatever urban forest environment you decide to partake in. I believe, I think last year, I think if we have some of our tier C group, they're just trying to get trees established as a whole. They're trying to get something going. They're not that they're starting at the basics of an urban forest, but that's their priority. So you can kind of see the difference where just increasing that tree canopy is a priority for one, um, and it changes from a municipality like ours, and on how we're trying to modify that. Um, Again, first and foremost, obviously, then the planning piece is key. Without our data and providing numbers and monitoring and all those different activities that surround that, without that, it's difficult to do any future planning. Um, so again, our part of our initiatives here for the city is reducing our carbon footprint, and with the additional trees. Um, and this is all long term. This is all long term planning. So again, it may vary from your municipalities. You may just now be trying to develop something on a short term remedy for what you're trying to accomplish. Here in Las Cruces, obviously, we're trying to develop. We've taken the short term approach to things, and have tackled that fairly well. But now we're moving on to the long term stuff, and how do we preserve for you know for the future on down the road. Um, Increasing species diversity. That's again, this kind of helps within our planning. So as I mentioned earlier, for some reason, and that was just, I'm not sure if that was just the choice of tree or what the thoughts were on, but 40-50 years ago, mulberries were the trees to plant. And obviously now we've had so much canopy, mulberry canopy, and now those trees have either started to gradually uh, die off, or they're creating they're impeding with public infrastructure where we've had to seek removal. So that the long-term planning obviously wasn't considered at that time. But now that we're in that we're in that piece right now with seeing what it's causing and some of the detriment and uh, some of the allergies, obviously the uptick in allergies that they create. But I mean, obviously, infrastructure, the damaging of infrastructure is probably the biggest piece that's costly for us as a municipality. So um, again, we're starting to see a significant loss in mulberries around town. Um, and so there, 40, 50 years ago, there really wasn't actually consideration for, well, we got to plant different species of trees. The thinking back then was just, we just need something that provides shade, you know. And again, this is kind of the long-term effects that we're now having to deal with. So always increasing our diversity is key to keeping our urban forest sustainable. Um, I mentioned earlier one of our challenges is dealing with mistletoe. Again, maybe 20 years ago, we designed parks all with one species of tree, whether it was all cottonwoods, whether it was all ash trees, and so now we're running into that. We never considered species diversity, and now that we're having to deal with the different pests or you know when we're dealing with stuff like that, the detriment that it's causing is now we're having a park that probably had 10, 15 ash trees. We've probably had to result in removing all those. And now we're having to start all over again, rather than keeping that diversity up. And if we lost maybe an ash tree or two, we're okay because we still have a sustainable canopy from different species of trees. So again, that's tough. Um, another notorious tree, and I call it notorious, but it was a research tree that was developed or was researched at NMSU, and that's our Afghan pine. And I can remember back in the 80s when that tree was like wildfire. Just everybody had it. The university was giving trees to everybody at that time, and now that everybody has them, again, we're starting to see. I think last year we had an uptick in bark beetles that were hitting pine trees, so that's really decreased. There's been some decline, significant decline, uh, whether that's in the city and public green space or actual private ownership. So um, again, that's one of those challenges now that we're having to start. So some areas we're having to start all over again, but now we're having to do it planning the as part of our recipe is initiating that tree diversity for green space, increase canopy and cover goals. So that's our biggest challenge. I think our last study, there was a study that was completed prior to my arrival with the department, and if I recall right, our goal or the current goal is to at least obtain a 15% increase in tree canopy on the study that was performed. For us to get to 15% trees, that puts us into like about 50,000 trees that we need to install. So that's 15%. I know it seems like a small number, but it is quite significant in trees that we're trying to. And overall, it's not just what we're installing as a municipality. Um, so anything that gets installed obviously does get counted for, whether it's on the private side or on the private industry. So as part of our planning, obviously we do coordinate out. Um, there's different guidelines for developers when they're actually installing or building a structure. the type of landscape that needs to be installed with it, or a minimum of trees that need to be planted within that. So it's not just the number we're tracking as a municipality. I mean, as an organization, Parks and Rec, it's a number that we're tracking as a municipality as a whole. So that kind of umbrellas that. So resource monitoring. So that's probably one of our biggest. That's our biggest tool, and I believe it's any urban forester's tool that you need to keep in your tool bag, rather than the shovel and work gloves for planting trees. This is critical, and it's key to what we're trying to do as an industry. And I kind of mentioned that earlier. It paints the picture as far as what needs to be done. It's how do we get there? What do we have? It answers those questions, and it kind of gives you a starting point on making some determinations on your approaches. So there's different resource monitoring tools out there. So obviously tree inventory and tree mapping resources that are out there. Tree management plans, obviously, that's kind of your blueprint as far as how you're going to manage your forest, and whether it's outlining what you have, down to your yearly maintenance, your yearly budgets, what you're going to allocate, what you're going to establish. So that kind of outlines, that's your blueprint for everything on how you operate. As us as an organization with the City of Las Cruces, we're just now, again, we're actually finalizing some of our tree management plan. The key piece to that is actually trying to finish up. We're trying to get this our tree inventory completed, and that's kind of the missing piece to actually finalizing our management plan. We already have all our approaches and every bit of information on how our initiatives are going to take place, but they may tweak a little bit depending on how our tree inventory study goes and what some of our findings are with that. Quantity, cost, to benefit. That's again, that's another inventory or monitoring piece that I really look after, and I'm kind of a stickler on that. We are stewards of taxpayer funding, so it's in our best interest to utilize that as best as possible. So I'm constantly looking at when we plant trees. So on a yearly basis for our initiative or our departmental initiative, through the Parks and Rec, we're actually planting 300 trees per year. That's kind of our quota. That's what we have to establish. Once we get those trees in, then at the end of the physical year, then what I do is I have staff go back. We revisit all those areas, and then I look at survivability rates to see where we're at. Where did we fail, or what could we have done better? And sometimes it either points back to maybe I don't have the adequate staffing to be able to do any after tree care with any additional watering when they're established, because we probably got pulled aside to tackle another issue. So it may be that. It may be our planning. Maybe we didn't really we overlooked some of the areas, and we didn't have adequate soil, or it wasn't an adequate planting site. So we look at that. Obviously, irrigation, we look at that stuff. How much water is this area actually getting through some of our budgeting? And so as I get all those numbers together, that gives me the dollar figure as far as, okay, here's our survivability rate. Here's what I can tell upper management as far as here's why we failed, and here's what we're good at, and here's what we need some help with, you know. And that dollar figure, unfortunately, in this industry, when you're always making that approach for funding, whether it's through civic leaders, CEOs, directors, anybody of that stature, um, the perceived notion to them is always everything is in a dollar figure. So if you can't paint the picture in a dollar figure, then they won't understand what you're trying to explain to them, or what you're actually trying to accomplish. So keep that in mind. Again, I know you guys are aspiring in the industry, but really, my advice later on, if you really want to make a mark, always try to present things in dollar figures, because that's what really gets heads turning in the industry as far as what approaches you need to take. Again, ordinances are our biggest thing. We don't quite have those yet. Um, Again, every municipality is going to be different. So what we've kind of seen from our experiences here, it's still a touchy issue to pursue right now for establishing ordinances with the general public. There's still a lot more discussions that need to take place before we can even consider establishing establishing any ordinances for Las Cruces. So, yeah, do we need that? Definitely. The approach is going to be, it's really going to take some time to create a well thought out ordinance for our city, and still trying to keep that balance for um, what the needs of our environment is and the needs of the public, and trying to mesh those together. So um, I don't see us touching on ordinances in the near future, but again, we still got a long road to take on that. Um, so as you guys kind of get into this program a little bit more, this will come across your paths as far as some of the tools that we use to develop ordinances or standards for how we're establishing our landscapes or our tree planting. So I mean, obviously you guys you'll hear that a lot. ISA, International Society of Arboriculture. So that's kind of um, our go-to um, resource for anything that's tree related, and that kind of helps us put a backing to some of our initiatives and what we're trying to establish out there. Um, ANSI, American National Standards of Institute, obviously that's another, it's another set of it's another resource that's utilized in the landscape industry for landscape installations and tree installations. You'll catch that. Um, and just overall keeping up to date with standards. You know, we're in an ever-changing environment, so practices that we were performing 15 years ago, those have been, it's kind of outdated now. It's not a recommended practice anymore. And so I always trying to keep up with the latest research. That again, that's probably, I can't say more than enough about that, and stress that upon you guys. You know, as the industry continues to move forward, be ready and always expect an ever changing standards and recommendations and research, because it's something that we work around. You know, I always have this discussion with some of the other departments, and whether it's our plumbing department or our electrical department, and sometimes with the public. Um, you know, sometimes we get overlooked that things are a lot easier for us than it's easier said than done, you know. So when I go into these discussions sometimes with other departments, you know, my biggest my biggest argument with them is we're unique in what we're doing. So it's, in a sense, if you think about it, we work around Mother Nature. We got to work around the different climates. We got to work around the different seasons. There's so many things we don't have. We don't have the resources that uh, an electrician or a plumber would have, where they have nuts and bolt parts that are already in stock. We don't have that. We don't have that. The resources for that, and so we're always constantly having to work around our surroundings and what's thrown at us in an industry, and trying to uh, I guess perform to the best of our ability with what we got and what we're capable of. Again, that's always an argument that I can win any day with some of my colleagues in the different industries out there. Um, again, I can't stress enough on really keeping up to with industry standards. That's key. Outreach, obviously, that's another one. Without promotion and creating awareness, I think we'd really be a lot farther off than what we are as a civilization. Um, some of the work that we do here within the city is I spend a lot of time engaging with our K through 12 students around the schools, um, dealing with our public officials, architects, engineers. So again, this is probably just one of the many hats that I wear in this role. So whether it's providing that expertise to our public officials, architects, and engineers, again, that's always, it helps in the decision making and what we're trying to gain out of our expansion. Tree stewards, again, that's, you guys are crucial in what we do. We can never have enough eyes out there to help monitor things, and without your guys's stewardship, again, it would make things a lot more tough on the industry. um, Budget preparations, that's always critical in any planning. So how you're utilizing your funding and the best approaches with it, that's again another key aspect to that. Data collection, um, grant proposals. This is probably something that was new to me within the industry, coming from a facilities background. Never really had to deal with grant proposals or drafting of grants um, in my previous career, but um, now here in this role as an urban forester, it's yeah, I can't tell you. I wish I had endless amounts of funding to do what I need to do, but I rely on grants as much as I can and where I can get them, and so it's it's a benefit. It's an added benefit when I can obtain them. So that's critical to my operation. Questions?
We have a question from Alyssa or Missy.
Hi, first of all, thank you for your presentation. This was really, really interesting. So I had a question with regards to street trees that are planted along busy streets. I've seen a lot in Albuquerque of damage to those trees from vehicles. And I was wondering, in the planning, are you sort of planting those trees to avoid being hit by cars, or with the intention that they get hit by the vehicle and it protects the driver from hitting something worse, or protects the building behind it or something like that? Just kind of how does traffic play into that planning?
At this point, it's probably very limited, just because our priority right now is increasing canopy, overall canopy. So I mean, it's a good. I've never really taken that into consideration up until you mentioned that, and that's probably something we may need to look into. I mean, at some point, I guess I guess at some point we'll come across a unique area where we would probably have to integrate something like that and consider the safety piece in our planning. But yeah, for the most part, it's just the increasement of tree canopy overall.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
I'll just start talking. Didn't raise my hand, but thank you, Orlando. It's been a fascinating journey into the world that you work with.
Yeah, definitely. It's got, like I said, it's got its challenges and it's got its rewards. So it's um, I like the role overall, and I like the new challenges
Talk
and
about the industry, and I can see why you kind of look at it in that perspective because there's a lot of money involved, and you're dealing with a large metro area that requires that level of kind of perspective or oversight where you're serving an entire city. And I wonder, given the discussions about carbon and having that carbon intake, and then that becomes a monetized um, practice of capturing carbon. How far are we as American cities in monetizing that benefit of trees so that, let's say, a company moving into Las Cruces might invest in the community by providing, maybe you're part of that 10,000 trees as an incentive for their, being in Las Cruces. How far are we from that kind of relationship?
I would have to say on our level, um, I really would. I think we're gaining some movement on it, but we're not where we'd like to be. I think one of our biggest partners right now, and they've taken that approach into carbon sequestration is El Paso Electric, and so now they're really trying to get on the green scene and promote some of that urban canopy with us as well. So we've partnered up with them on a few events, mainly our Arbor Day event that we partner up with them, and so they're trying to give back to the uh, give back to the environment in a sense. Um, but other than that, it's if that's part of the legwork that we have to do as a municipality, we kind of have to go out there and get the businesses and grab them by the hand and kind of steer them in this direction and open up that window of opportunity for them. Because if not, then the initiative just isn't taken on from a business standpoint or their approach on the way they handle their approach to environmental benefits. So I mean, I think we still got a ways to go, honestly.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. Do we have any more questions out there? I'm looking for raised hands. Orlando, thank you very much for this in-depth look into Las Cruces Parks and Rec and the enormous work that you do in your municipality. We really appreciate this presentation, and I know a few people have had to sign off, and all were thankful. We have this presentation recorded, so it'll be available within the Canvas module as soon as possible. And I appreciate everybody being here. Thanks for being part of this presentation. And any other closing thoughts from you, Orlando?
No, not. I think I've given you guys an earful for tonight.
Thank you for all the work you do.
I appreciate you.
From
Thank you for having me.
Our tree steward group. All right, you all have a lovely evening. When you see Daisy out there, she has her baby recently in the last days. She was in our mentoring group with myself and Ray, and she was able to share her moments of being a mother. So we're grateful for that. And all right, you all be safe and have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thank you very much. That was very wonderful. And as a state employee, I feel the pain and the passion.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank
Tracy.
you.